Welcome everyone to this week's Mutant Meetup call. After being gone for a couple weeks, we are back. So we hold these calls every Tuesday at 9 a.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. UTC. I've got several things to go over today. We've got a couple votes that are live on Snapshot. One is a buyback proposal, and one is a grant request for BootNode in their Covered Vaults project. I'll do an overview of both of these governance proposals and talk a little bit about them both. We'll go through the updates for the week. I don't think that he was going to be able to make it today. He's having some technical difficulties, but I can go through some of the updates on the team side. I'll do a review of the last week in cover sales, active coverage by cover type, and I'll go through some of our community updates. So without further ado, I will jump into the overview of the Snapshot governance votes. So we have two important proposals that are open for voting. You can find both of these on Snapshot, and the link for both is in the thread for today's call. The first one was put up by Vincent. He put this up yesterday, and we've made announcements about this. You can find the discussion on the forum and the vote live on Snapshot. So this is going to be open until October 2nd. It closes at 6 a.m. Eastern. This one is proposing to use some of the treasury assets to buy back wNXM below book value. So that would be using LDO and GAL holdings to buy back wNXM. So currently wNXM trades below book. Last I checked, it was somewhere around 0.01 ETH per NXM or so. But the current book value of NXM is about 0.0226 ETH per NXM. You could find that by taking the total NXM supply and dividing that by the number of ETH assets held in the capital pool, and you can find that information in the Nexus tracker. So the proposed value of these assets comes to roughly about $190,000. The proposal that Vincent has put up would be using these assets to buy back wNXM at no more than 0.015 ETH per NXM or per wNXM. This would be done in a few phases according to his proposal. This discussion happened previously this summer, and Vincent just moved this onto Snapshot this week. So I think this is an important one to look at. I know there's also the initiative to buy back wNXM below book with the assets that we get after the ETHW is sold. But I'll be providing an update about that initiative later in the call as well. Personally, I think that this is an important vote. I'm not sure exactly what the market is going to look like, but I think that buying back wNXM below book value is definitely value accretive. It would be a great addition to the treasury and something that I think would definitely be something to increase our holdings in the treasury, and also, we trade way below book value, capturing that value, holding it in the treasury, and then using that to reward future contributors or for important grant proposals that come up, ways that we can further align members. I think these are all important things. I wanted to know if anybody else had any thoughts on this proposal, if they've had time to review it, or if anybody wanted to say anything. Okay. If not, and just as a reminder, you can always type something in the community calls text channel if you want to share any thoughts. This is going to be open again until the 2nd. I think it's important. Everybody should review and vote on this. Currently, there's relatively low participation on this vote. So this vote was updated. Vincent had the time period for a longer period of about 3 weeks. Given that he's revised it, if you voted on this previously, you'll need to re-vote again since the vote is essentially kind of restarted when it was reset. So go ahead and take a look at this on the forum and on Snapshot, and be sure to vote. The other proposal that's up is for the BootNode grant. So we've already issued one grant for the first phase of this project. This is for the next 2 phases, according to their proposal. And this will be open for voting until the 1st of October. BootNode is working on a ERC 4626 compliant covered vault. And this would be something like a urine vault that when someone deposits into it, it's natively covered. So the interest that's generated on deposits in that vault, a portion of that would go to purchasing cover vault wide for everyone that's in there. So if there is a loss event, essentially the vault would receive that payment and people could still withdraw assets. This is something that BootNode has worked through and has gone through the ideation phase and has designed things out. Now they're requesting a grant for the development phase. The deliverables that they've outlined, which you can find in the Snapshot vote and on the forum, would be creating an open source repository that has all the code, the scripts, and any documentation needed for our team to deploy this. Once V2 is live, this is something that's dependent on V2 being live, and then testing this code to make sure everything works correctly with the wider V2 code base. They estimate that this would take between 8 and 11 weeks of work to accomplish this, and they're asking for 50,000 USDC and 1,450 wNXM to start these next phases. So important to note that initially they're just asking for 25,000 USDC to get started, and then upon completion they would receive the remaining USDC and then the wNXM component as well. This one I think is really important. When I went to ETH Berlin, which I'll talk a little bit about later in the call as well, I talked to several different people about this, and I think covered vaults is something that others are going to be excited for a variety of reasons. One of which is that you don't need to buy cover if you're in a covered vault. So it's essentially opt-in or opt-out coverage for people in depositing into different DeFi protocols. So there definitely is excitement for it within the wider DeFi community. I am, on a personal note, am in support of this proposal. This one has a little bit more engagement. So either way, though, I think be sure to review on the forum. The BootNode team has outlined this in detail. I know that Gautier and others have commented on the forum as well. So if you have any questions, I know the BootNode team is very responsive, and this vote is going to be live until the 1st of October at 11:30 a.m. Eastern. Any questions on this grant proposal? Anything I can clarify here? Okay, if there's no questions on this point, I will move on. Like I said, Hugh isn't able to join us this morning. He's having some technical difficulties, but I can give a little bit of a highlight on the team update. Some of the main points are that the entire Nexus team got together at an on-site event in London. We worked on quite a few things in person, and we really accomplished quite a bit. We talked about priorities for V2. We talked about some of the outstanding projects that we're working on, talking about aligning and working better as a team so that the DAO teams and some of the core team work a bit more cohesively together and move forward to support the V2 launch. Still no timeline on V2, but V2 plans are moving along. The staking contracts and the staking module itself is fairly complicated, so there's a few things that the engineers are working through. Because we have a relatively small engineering team, it's taking a little bit longer than anticipated, but we have hired a couple new staff, so someone on front end and somebody who is a back end Solidity engineer that's going to be helping us as well. Still looking to hire at least one more Solidity developer, and I know that we're working on it as well. But as we make more progress here on the UI and UX for V2 and the remaining components for V2, definitely providing updates. And once I know when we're clear for launch, I'll be sure to let everybody know ahead of time. An update on Ray's side for tokenomics. Tokenomics, we're making good progress there. This is something that we talked about at our on-site as well. Really now it's just about refining some of these proposed mechanisms that Ray has shared previously. We've gotten feedback from the community that Ray has incorporated, and feedback from some of the team members. So in the next few weeks, this will be something that'll be put up on the forum once we've incorporated all of that feedback and done another round of review. And at that point, that'll be open for community input. But if anybody has any questions about tokenomics or where it's currently at, feel free to jump into the tokenomics revamp channel that's in the Nexus investment section in the Discord. So if you tag Ray, Ray can give you a brief update. And if you'd like to look at the current tokenomics specs, Ray can share that with you as well if you send him a DM. Definitely good progress. I think it was really great for us to all meet and work together in person. It's definitely something that's it's easier to get things done as a group and have some of these important discussions together in person. So now it's going back, taking that away, and getting to work on some of those important things and moving forward so we can get closer to launching V2. But yeah, so those are the updates for this week. Any questions from anybody on that? Anything I can clarify or speak more on? If not, I will move on to a review of the last week in cover sales. So you can always find this data in the Nexus tracker. That's where this is pulled from every week. In the last week, we sold a little bit more than 9.5 million in cover and earned a little bit more than 21,000 in premiums. Largest cover buys that came in were for Convex Finance, Vector, Balancer V2, and Beefy. We saw several cover buys come in for Beefy and some very large cover buys coming in for the others. Also seeing some cover buys coming in for Euler, which was listed in the last several weeks, and GMX, which was also listed in the last several weeks. And then some of the ones that we see cover buys for on a fairly regular basis, Uniswap and Aave. And then one outlier being Idle V4, which I don't think I've seen a cover buy for Idle for a while, but there's been a relatively small one there. The DAI denomination is still on the higher side, 85% DAI denomination for cover sold, and about 15% ETH denomination for cover sold. Roughly about the same for premiums earned as well this week. Looking at the total active coverage by cover type. Here we can see for protocol cover in dollar terms, a little bit more than 156 million in active coverage for protocol cover, almost 27 million in active cover for custody cover, 7.5 million for ETH2 staking cover, which is still the stake-wise cover buys, and about 2.6 million in active coverage for yield token cover. The breakdown of the individual covers for this can be found in the Nexus tracker, but I'll also have a review of this in the newsletter this week as well, which will go out tomorrow morning or afternoon. And then some community updates. The first of which I think is pretty exciting. So Nexus Mutual is now in the Safe app. So if you use Gnosis Safe or Safe, I think is they're rebranded as now. Yeah, so we're now listed in the Safe app. So if you're using a multi-sig, whether you're a DAO institution or just an individual that's securing your assets, you can now access Nexus Mutual directly in the Safe app interface. This is really great. We have protocol cover for Safe. So if you want to protect your assets in the smart contracts that assets are held in Safe, you can do that. Or if you're deploying assets in DeFi, you can get protocol cover or yield token cover, depending on where you're deploying your assets to protect your assets. So having this directly in the Safe app is great. As somebody who is on several different multi-sigs and uses multi-sigs quite a bit, having things directly in the Safe app makes my life and many others' lives a lot easier. So I'm looking forward to seeing more people in Safe use Nexus Mutual to secure their assets. I think this is a big step forward for us, and looking forward to making the announcement on our social channels later today as well. I went to Berlin Blockchain Week along with Ray. We went to a couple events. So we went to the Regenerate event and we attended DuneCon. Both were really great. I met a lot of great people. I talked with several projects about what we're working on with V2 and covered vaults. There was definitely a lot of enthusiasm for covered vaults. Talking about V2 with the ability to either build on top of Nexus or integrate directly into a protocol's UI to allow people to buy cover at the point of deposit. These were both things that people were pretty excited about. I had a couple discussions with projects that have ERC 4626 compliant vaults. They were very enthused about working with us even at the early stages on the covered vaults project. So that was really great to see that enthusiasm. I've definitely followed up with those people since. And then going around talking with different projects, I saw folks from Aave, and I saw folks from a variety of different projects that were active in Berlin, either at the ETH Berlin Hackathon or a lot of great Dune wizards at DuneCon, and talking about ways that we can move forward on some things. I talked with some folks from Gitcoin about how they approach governance, which is really great. But I think the broader takeaway is talking to people about risk at these events. It seemed pretty clear to me that the one thing that was on many people's minds was bridge risk, which is something that we've talked about quite a bit before. So there was some requests to see us start to cover bridge risk. I talked with several people about some of the complexities involved in bridges and the inherent risk in some of them, but it's definitely something that we've talked about internally, and something I think as a community we could talk about more in different ways that we could potentially cover that, but also what some of those really important major risks are. And then talking about coverage in the sense of not just like protocol cover, but full stack protection or more integrated protection. This was a pretty big theme as more people are looking to get wider adoption in the space and to make it easier for others to get onboarded into DeFi and into different blockchain environments. Because there's quite a few hurdles in place still at the UI level for folks. Things can be tricky, but there's definitely a need and a desire for people to buy coverage for their assets. And then definitely excitement about the potential for us to cover real-world risk in V2 as well. So Ray and I both had some really great discussions with people. There's some follow-ups that both of us have to do. Some other things I think that will come out of this that I'm looking forward to sharing later. But it's always great to get together with others that are working in the space. I felt really energized afterwards. Even though we're in a bear market, there are so many people working on a lot of very innovative and great projects. I had the chance to talk with some of the folks working on Lens Protocol, and just great discussions about ownership and Web3 and some of the things that we're all working towards. So it was really great. Hopefully I can share some things that come out of those discussions in the next several weeks. And then I wanted to provide an update on the ETH proof of work vote. So at this stage, it's planning the execution of the sale of these assets. So a couple of important things to note is that we will be selling a relatively large amount of ETHW. Finding an exchange that we can do this that has sufficient liquidity so that if that we can sell and capture the value, but I think more importantly that there's enough liquidity to support the price without us dropping the price over time. So this will likely need to be done over time to be able to capture value. Just a note on the spot price, what you'll see on CoinGecko, that might be indicative of what it trades at currently, but with a relatively large sale on a centralized exchange, that can definitely impact the price and drop it fairly quickly. So execution on a SEX is something that we're planning out, but I think more importantly, because there's a lack of support on the proof of work chain, there's greater difficulty in execution. So for example, Gnosis Safe does not support the proof of work chain, so there's no multi-sig that I'm aware of that exists. So there's an intermediary step where assets have to be transferred from the capital pool address into essentially an EOA, and then that needs to go onto a SEX. There's a couple different ways that we could do that, but again, because there's a lack of support there, it makes execution and security a little bit trickier. And so it is something that we need to be careful with when we execute. But looking at ways that we can do that and still capture value and use that for a buyback as it's outlined in the proposal. The caveat is that making the sale as long as we can capture at least $1 million worth of value for the mutual. But I've had some folks asking me about this on Discord, so I just wanted to highlight that even if it is on the proof of work chain, it's still on chain, so you can verify that the assets are in the capital pool on the other chain as well. There's a link to today's community call. I've just got a screenshot of that contract address, so you can see the assets are still on that contract. Like I said, I've had several people asking me about this, and I think the biggest takeaway is that this is challenging and something that we want to get right. I'm definitely excited for us to capture this value and to buy back more wNXM below book value. I think that'll be incredibly valuable for the mutual, extend our runway for the treasury, which we can then use for a variety of things in the future. So when I have more information to share on here, once a plan has been finalized, I'll make an announcement across our social channels, provide an update on a meetup call, and include that in the newsletter as well. But this is something that we're looking at and working on. It's just a little bit more difficult than it could have been if there was a bit more support on the proof of work chain, and then just finding the right centralized exchange to make this sale that has sufficient liquidity so that we can do this in a reasonable time frame. Any questions on the proof of work update or any of the other updates I provided in this section?
Hey Lee, can you hear me?
I can, yes.
Hey, yeah, just bouncing back on the proof of work thing and the sex options. I'm not sure which ones you are considering right now, but just wanted to let you know that I sold my personal holdings on FTX, and there is good liquidity there, and I even think they have an OTC desk if that's needed. So yeah, just wanted to let you know that.
Okay. Yeah, I will definitely pass that along to the folks who are working on the execution side of this. And then at this point in the call, it is the open forum. So if anybody has any questions, or if there's anything I didn't cover, anything you'd like to bring up, now is the time to bring anything up that I haven't touched on. So, is there anything that anybody would like to ask, or anything that anyone would like to talk about?
Hey, one question on the ETH proof of work. What's the actual size of the that's in the treasury?
You mean the amount of assets that are in the capital pool on the proof of work chain?
Yeah, to be sold, the ETH proof of work to be sold, exactly.
Yeah, so that was on the previous slide.
Sorry.
But you can find, no, you're fine. You can find that in the Mutant Meetup resources channel as well. But it's 106,859.1936 roughly ETHW, or at the value when I took this screenshot this morning, a little bit over $1.1 million.
Got it. Yeah, so to the previous point, there's around 35 million of volume that's going a day that's going through FTX. So in terms of size, it shouldn't be too dramatic for the market to absorb it.
All right. Any other questions or comments before I close out the call for today? If not, I will wrap up the call for today. So thank you everyone for joining us. I know that we took a break for a couple weeks while I was taking a vacation and while we had our on-site event, but glad to be back. We'll have our next meetup call next Tuesday. Look for some of these updates in the newsletter. There'll be a little bit more detailed information on active coverage, And I'll be making an announcement about Nexus Mutual in the Safe app later today on Twitter and across some of our social channels as well. So thank you everyone for joining us. As I have more updates, I'll share those, but I hope that you have a great rest of your day and a wonderful rest of your week. And we'll see you on the call next week.